Oh my gosh. Okay. So I know you didn't want a video for this, and I'm not going to do it really formally, but I keep having so many thoughts that it's hard for me to write them all down. And so I'm trying to pick and choose which ones to kind of muse through. So there's a lot going on now. I'm piecing all of this together. And you'll get all the comments that I had before I broke down and decided I have to record this because there's so many thoughts that I just want to let them all spill out for you. Okay, so let's see if we can break this down a little bit. I'm in my comments. You're going to find that I'm suggesting that you go ahead and do the clever opening. I like how it sets the tone, but I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and make sure that we know. Um, you can tuck it in the opening paragraph of each letter who that person that you is. Go ahead and name them. And I'm saying that because, especially if they come into play throughout this journey, because I missed it all. And as I continue, I'm realizing a couple different things. So I missed the connection with Evan, the aspiring pilot, from chapter 1, being the same guy in here. I don't think I picked up on that. I'm also going to say that because I was looking for the trigger in this and I was focused on that and watching out for it and seeing how well it was done, that I kind of missed out on everything else that was happening around it. My brain kind of zeroed in on that. And so as I'm unraveling the other things that are going on at the same time, I find that you wrote this letter to Derek, but based on what happens with Josh, I'm kind of distracted by that and missing the whole entire thing of your relationship with Derek. Yeah. So, okay, you you broke the bro code cardinal rule when you hooked up with Evan's girlfriend. Go ahead and say what her name was. And say that it was his ex-girlfriend or his last girlfriend, because when I got the note that Evan is the aspiring pilot, I'm rereading this and realizing, how much he means to you at this point because of that opening letter. And so I'm seeing this differently. At first, when I first read it, I thought Evan was just another guy that you were dating, like, one of many. And I didn't have the history that was laid out for me from chapter 1. So at first, once you told me that Evan is the aspiring pilot, I was like, okay, oh my gosh, so was this her? Was this you? And now I'm rethinking. I'm like, I still don't think that was you. I think this is like an ex-girlfriend. Because you said here, I witnessed his crushed spirit in the aftermath. And then you say that, you end up it sounds like you got together with him after that. Your friendship was obliterated when his girlfriend, Bree, left Evan for you in 2015. So go ahead and name her up here so that it's not mistaken or confused with you at this point, if that makes sense. My tumbler of whiskey formed a condensation ring on the glass table next to his. I couldn't believe the sweet boy I knew from middle school was sitting in front of me, recounting how he met you at a continuation program for delinquent teens. The two of you graduated together and were thick as thieves for a decade. Your friendship was obliterated when his girlfriend... Okay. When I almost want to say when Bree left Evan for you. And just kind of drop all of that to be very clear. It was easy for me, as Evan's new love interest, I almost think there should be a comma there, to assume lofty judgments. So you've already got like this attitude towards him and like this preconception from like, because you're talking about his reputation in the first place and you've laid it out why. I wrapped them up in a box, bad, cruel, selfish, a ribbon of betrayal. So, okay, so you kind of thought this about him. All right, so did you meet him after he did this? I'm guessing you met him after they were no longer friends. And every ping and twist in my gut signaled cheating was wrong. Semantics and shades of gray don't detract from the deep hurt born out of betrayal. It was a steep step down from my high horse to see how far from the moral mark I strayed a few years later when I led you down a hall to my bedroom. I kind of wonder, so even though he and Evan were no longer friends. You continued to hang out with him because he was supplying you. I kind of feel like I need that reiterated here as to why you were still around him, because I didn't even know that he was your dealer because it said Dear Derek. So that I was kind of wondering why you were still hanging around him, even though he was no longer friends with Evan. And it sounds like their friendship was over before. So I'm like, who is this guy that you're hanging out with him with this preconception of him? And the next thing you know, you're following him down the room. Um, I'm guessing he's probably a pretty charismatic guy, but I'm not getting that. I'm guessing it because typically this kind of person has a sort of charisma that people are drawn to. And I could be completely wrong, but in my experience, they're they're a drug in their own right. So I don't get that from reading this though. I get what kind of person he was as far as a relationship. He could know you for 10 years and screw you over at the drop of a hat. Got it. And I've got your conception of yourself, yet you still did this. So, the betrayal of Evan being a huge source of shame. Got it. Okay. The events leading up to that night sank deeper into my stomach. Ears ringing. I guess now you're going to show me how you got there. All right. Ears ringing. I'm looking at this from a whole new set of eyes based on based on now knowing who Evan is from the beginning and trying to remind myself to focus on Derek because this letter is to him and to not be distracted by Josh. So I'm trying to do that. I almost wish I didn't know that I was keeping an eye out for the trigger when I first read it, because I think that it distracted me from some other things that are going on with this letter. Okay, so, but we're going to keep going. I'm going to try to read it. I'm reading it now, keeping some different things in mind. Yes. Okay. The events leading up to that night sink deeper into my stomach, ears ringing, my defenses grapple with the memories, desperate to stifle them. Evan and I had broken up a few months before, but there was a familiar comfort that kept us from severing ties entirely. One night, he and I were in my car at the quick stop down the street when he recognized Josh on a smoke break. Standing in front of the movie rental kiosk, Josh looked disheveled. His maroon uniform shirt hung too large and untucked over his khakis. A trail of smoke rose up beside him, spiraling through the air before dissipating into the fog. He approached my car and bent to rest his arms, cigarette still in hand, on the open window. Poking his head in to say hi, Josh raised his eyes, acknowledging me. Introductions were made before the conversation turned to you, Derek. That's how I knew you were affiliated. A connection that made my subconscious filed away for future reference. Okay, so you're introducing Josh here. And it's less about Derek than it is you've introduced Josh. You've introduced how you know. Actually, I still didn't know he was your drug dealer up here. All right, I have these thoughts. This is my suggestion. I'm going to stop myself and just say what I'm thinking. I guess okay, well, you still had some more notes for me that I haven't read yet. At this point, there's a mix of Derek and Josh, and with a sprinkle of Evan. Okay. I think we need to make Evan's name known in chapter 1. I still like saying dear to my aspiring pilot, but I'd slip his name in there. Go ahead and tuck it in there, even if it's just one time that lets you know that that's his name. And that way it still doesn't detract from the tone that you've set throughout the book. And then here, I kind of think, and I don't know which one to do first. I don't know which one to recommend first, but Josh needs his own letter. And some of this part that's in here where you meet Josh, I think you probably need a letter to Derek first, and then a letter to Josh. And this part probably needs to go inside the letter to Josh because you're starting with him, or you're getting into him. I remember throughout my reading of this trying to remind myself who the letter was to, and I think that's probably a sign that there's too much going on with both Derek and Josh in one letter, that it kind of it's easy to forget that the letter is to Josh or the letter is to Derek and get sucked into the whole story with Josh. So I really think they need separate letters, and you need to go through here and look and pull out the parts that pertain mostly to Josh and compile them into their own letter, and then fill in some space between in here between you and Derek, um, and give up some of the things that are traits of his. I don't know what Derek looks like. Um, so yeah, I mean, if Derek is your if he was your dealer and you were willing to sleep with him, why was that? You did it, but why did you do it? And I guess you were going to tell me here you were getting ready to move on up to kind of what happened. And I could keep reading, but I kind of have a feeling that generally overall this kind of needs to be separated out. And I hate that because your voice is so great, but I know that it'll come out better for it. Great. I read off my number one. Punch in his phone. Text me, and I'll send you my address when we get there. This was a blind invitation for trouble. That's foreshadowing. That's fine. You said you had other parts. It was late by the time you left. By the time you guys left, lingering in the living room, his jacket in hand, Josh tried to kiss me. He was mostly lucid by this point. I turned my head away. Yeah, I had a feeling this was. Obviously, you didn't want it because you're turning away. But see, this is between you and Josh, and it's detracting from your letter to Derek, because what Josh did to you is not Derek's fault. I'm not saying Derek's great, but I'm not saying that, he's not. Ultimately, Josh is responsible for what Josh did, not you, and not Derek, unless you asked Derek to help you, and he did not. Okay. Recklessly unhinged, spot on going insane after what had happened. I called you. So I called Derek to buy drugs to escape. Yeah. Okay. So we want the letter between and you don't know if, and at the end you ask if Derek knew. So Derek didn't know why you were doing what you were doing. They need to be two separate letters. They do. Yeah. I hate that. I'm so sorry. I hate telling you to do that, but I know they need to be separate. They really do. And I think that's why you're telling me that other readers are reading it, and you were trying to do it without names, and they were getting really confused. Ultimately, I think what's happening is, yes, the interactions overlay between the story between you and Josh and the story between you and Derek overlap or intertwine, and they can still do that, even though they're in separate letters. And when you write for each one, you can focus solely on what you want to get out, and that's also going to make the assault very clear. I'm inclined to tell you to put the one with you and Derek first, because he introduced you, didn't he? And that would flow chronologically. And you can even take pieces from, like I said, take pieces from here and separate them out by who they're mostly directed to or who they're mostly about. And it's going to show you when you move them all over to all the Josh parts over to the Josh letter. You're going to see how much is left here between you and Derek, and I think you're going to see that it's not as much. And you probably actually have more you need to get out about that too. Yeah. This refers to Derek sleeping with Evan's ex and Bree, and now about to sleep with me. You and Blink only drove for what happened next. For cheating, even though I knew the back history. Yeah. The shame and moral bankruptcy. I really hated myself for this happening, honestly, probably even more. Oh, gosh, okay. That's because Evan meant a lot to you, I'm guessing. Okay, so we took another hit, and I stepped further away from the kind of person. Okay, we want to be elusive for the tone and for the voice, but at the same time, this is a motivation for why you're hurting yourself. So the example that I sent you for my scene, that's more like a draft. Like honestly, that entire story, um, when I did the very first draft of it, I had all of the assault, all the details of everything surrounding it, even the things that happened because of it, all in one chapter. And now it is pulled apart into chunks and spread out throughout the entire book because it is literally the reason that assault led to something similar to what this is to you. Like you're saying that you hated this happening even more than what he did. That it's a pivotal moment that changes you, and then you have to make peace with yourself. Okay. So it's basically this broke you. You did it, which so it's probably important for you to somehow get into this letter. What was it about him that made you do that? I don't, and if I reread it, I might get that. I'm not sure because I'm really thinking. My brain is almost turned off at this point, saying, "Okay, these have to be separated," and then I need to look at it again as two separate, and that way I can focus solely on Derek and solely on Josh. And right now they're intertwined, and I can't, because I don't personally know them, and because I'm the reader experiencing the story through you. They just got to come apart, and they can have reflecting moments. This was happening over here while this was going on, because let's say your reader already read your story between you and Derek, and now they're onto your story with Josh. All of a sudden, it connects back to moments that of in with Josh, and they're going to make sense to the reader. And you're still going to be able to, you're already going to know the history, and you're going to be able to focus on the current letter before you, if that makes sense. um I had to break down and just come into the video form here because I couldn't type fast enough, and I wanted to get all my ramblings out, because sometimes if I ramble, I will get to an important point. Sometimes the ramblings themselves are helpful. I don't know. But um yeah. Okay. I really hated myself for this happening. All right. Let's see. What happened in the weeks leading up to this? And in that moment, I turned my head when Josh leaned in for the kiss. All of it. No amount of soap would wash away. Yeah. Oh, I know this feeling right here. All of it. Betraying even. Okay. So what you've got in here is great. All your hints are great. I think I just wanted you to be very, I hate to say I encourage you to be graphic, but your repulsion, the moment where you kind of just, the struggle, the physical struggle, that whole thing. I can send you the first draft of what I wrote. It's got a lot of flaws in it that you would notice that I now currently point out. But like I said, it's a very first draft, and this was the first time I ever put to paper what happened to me. So I can send it, and I do literally say the things that were said to me while it was being done. I say what happened to me. And honestly, after letting it flow out the way it wanted to, I feel better. But I feel even better about it today when I'm on like draft 20, okay, and I'm writing it, and I've taken the entire story and these main points, and I've pulled them apart and tucked them here and there throughout a piece of fiction. And the first draft was in fiction. It was tucked in a piece of fiction as well, but it was an info dump. Okay. And it was actually not a too terribly written info dump. I reread it this morning because I remember it being much more graphic than the little segment I sent you. And I realized why I've picked it apart and done what I've done with it is because it comes out as an info dump. And so I'm doing it more justice, being equally just as graphic as I was in the first draft. By sprinkling it throughout the book, it has more squirming impact. Also, you get more attached to this character who is just naive as all get out. But each thing that stripped you apart deserves its own individual letter. So if this interaction with him broke a piece of you, then it deserves completely nothing interfering with it. And then you have another layer stripped away in its own, and it needs its own place. So yeah, I'm going to stop, and I'm just going to say, I think they need to be picked apart into two separate chapters, and you are going to be happier in the long run, even though it's not fun to do that. And I hate to put that volume of work on you, but I think that it's going to be the best thing for your book and for your story. And I think you're going to be glad you did it. And I think you're going to find when you get other people to read it, they're not going to have that whatever feedback they're giving you. I kind of got the impression they were kind of getting lost. I was lost in a couple places and then I would get a little bit of information from you and it would answer it and I would see the whole thing differently. And then at the bottom of it, I realized the overlying repetitive thing was the two need their own chapter. They need their own letter. Okay, I'm going to stop repeating myself, and I hope this is helpful. And I'm going to see what you come up with. And if you want me to read for you more, I am here. And I may be slow as I'll get out, but I am here. And as I promised, I am invested particularly in this difficult part. But yeah, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop there. Okay. All right. You're doing great. It's a beautiful voice. Do not be discouraged in any way, shape, or form. I hate getting a tough recommendation. Like, for example, I myself am picking apart my entire novel for like the 20th time in like 10 years. I'm not joking. But I know that it's definitely much better for it. It's definitely much better for it. And then some bottom line part of me wonders if it shouldn't be less fiction and a little more of what happened, and then maybe the whole entire thing would come together beautifully and easily. But I don't want to, kind of like you changed names, I don't want to throw a whole bunch of people under the bus. So honestly, including the person who violated me because they were a child at the time, and I hope that they've grown and evolved into something better. But anyway, I'm going to send this to you now, and I'll talk to you soon.